Newtown Township were to pull out of the jointure?
Well,
What happens to the comprehensive? I'm just throwing this out there because it's a 10-year plan. 3 years from now, we may want to pull out of the jointure.
honestly, I don't know how we pull out the jointure, but I know we can. I don't know what the process is, but if
Will
that
we
were,
have to form our own comprehensive plan just for Newtown Township?
I think it would make sense that we would do that. Just the same way we have a comprehensive plan being developed for the business commons. You can do that at any level you want to do it. It's the same Bucks County Planning Commission helping us track that.
So what do you think the advantages of us pulling out of the?
I don't see any advantage of, in my personal opinion, and we got, basically the whole board is here. My opinion is the jointure needs us. We don't need the jointure. We've outgrown the jointure. The main reason, the history of the jointures, we were to absorb the business and the density. They absorb nothing except the rolling hills of Bucks County. So if we were to leave the jointure, they would have to find another township which would be able to become another Newtown. In other words, they'd have to absorb the business section, they'd have to have all different kind of dense housing, which that would fall on the responsibility of both Wrightstown and Upper Makefield. One of the main reasons the borough pulled out is because the borough is basically landlocked. There's no benefit for them to be in the
Well, they had
joint.
no room for any kind of high density.
And we're pretty much going to be built out within the next couple of years. So we've served our purpose, I believe. Again, one man's opinion, I don't speak for the board, I just speak for Phil Calabro.
So in that case, we would be able to, as far as zoning goes, create our own zoning?
We would stand on our own. Any ordinances, any kind of, they would be Newtown based. We wouldn't have to send them through the jointure, wait for any kind of revisions.
So we can make our own decisions and make our own changes as we see fit.
Absolutely.
We'd be at the union like any other.
Yeah.
We are the only jointure in the state.
Yeah, I guess my observation in response to Phil, and again, I'm coming here new, is there's like a symbiotic relationship of the three municipalities. And while we drive a lot of things, we do benefit from them being part of it, the open spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So if we just go our own way, then they maybe go their own way, and we don't enjoy some of the open spaces and things that we want to find in their municipalities.
That's another perspective.
Yeah.
Sure. And this is something the supervisors have to debate. If they want, the planning commission to do more work on it, you can direct us to work on it.
I'm just throwing out a question, I'm not debating anything.
Did it say in the beginning of the plan that every municipality in the state has to have a plan every 10 years?
But we're a jointure, so.
Yes,
So ours is a
so ours
combination
is
of the
a
three.
three communities.
I am sure that if we were to leave the jointure, I'm sure the process probably take a year or two to get through all those the votes that you have to go through. Must be a referendum or something, perhaps, I don't know. But the state would not insist that we automatically have our own comprehensive plan. That we'd have, a period of time to develop one. Because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of changes to our zoning to make sure that we're protected as much as we can be. And that'll take, this is taking 2 years or 3 years. Doing one for ourselves could easily take 2 or 3 years. But the state is not going to come down on us for doing it, just that it will give us the time necessary to get it done.
So the disadvantages for Upper Makefield and Wrightstown to not be part of the jointure, would they have to take certain zoning?
They have to, well, the reason the jointure exists at this point is to allow certain uses to be addressed to certain municipalities. We agreed to take all the density, which is the commercial and the residential density. That's why Upper Makefield and Wrightstown don't have sewers, for example, or don't have sewers everywhere, for example. Wrightstown has quarries, Newtown doesn't have to have quarries. Theoretically, if we break it up, Newtown would have to have quarries, but I'm not too concerned about that because there's no place for quarries in Newtown. They're not going to be tearing down buildings to start digging holes in the ground. That's not going to happen.
Well, you have, the borough doesn't have a quarry. built out and there's no place to put a quarry, they can't force it.
That's what I just said, yeah.
I thought they could.
Only if there was room to do it. If there were, we had like acres and acres of undeveloped land, and underneath that land there was granite or whatever else they quarried up in Wrightstown, then we'd have an issue. We might have to
Isn't
actually allow
that
it.
kind of what's happening now? Not with quarries, but with other things we have not provided for?
And vice versa with the other townships too. Would they have to take it an OR district or a LI or?
To the extent that they had room for one, yeah, they'd have to have a lot more room for commercial growth, absolutely. They'd have to have their own supermarkets and small shopping centers and small strip malls and whatever it is. They'd have to do that. To the extent.
Provide all different kind of housing, you know.
Yeah, to the extent that their infrastructure allows for it, because the
The
building
way would go, there are 3-acre pieces of property with only one house on it. That they would have to develop, townhouses, condos, so they'd have to fulfill the requirements.
But do they? I mean, that property is owned by somebody.
Well, if
If you
Not
have-
all of it, I mean, they're not gonna take somebody's, well, if there's eminent domain, they can't take
Yeah, but-
people's property.
That's not
But I mean, that's not gonna happen. But if there is a large parcel of land, that could
Can you
be a
rezone?
business.
Yes, it
Yeah.
can be rezoned, and.
I mean, they could have a developer come in like they did
Yeah,
us,
like
and
here.
hold our feet to the fire, and we're gonna take you to court, and,
Of course.
As
And
a-
that's what
as-
having your
as-
jointure comes in handy.
I mean, I guess there are pros and cons.
Well, yeah,
Did it come in handy with
for
Walmart?
any kind of questionable business that wants to go into the jointure,
It goes into the
they
quarry.
designate it into the quarry, which I'm surprised
It's a
no
joke.
real crackerjack attorney has ever sued the jointure because of that issue. Well, maybe there have been lawsuits, I'm not sure. But I mean, that's the only, if you weigh the pros and cons, and the only con against us is not having a quarry, we got the upper hand. They need more than we do.
Well, you know, I think where Wrightstown, they allow the E30 use in the quarry district. Who's gonna go there and try to develop this?
Fireworks in the quarry district, we were selling in the quarry district. Adult entertainment in the quarry district. The
That's
quarry
what our
district
to-do list
has
forever,
been,
isn't it?
has more zoning in the quarry district than any piece of property out there.
And where did Upper Makefield allow the E30 use?
There's a small area down on Taylorville Road and the Oxford Crossing Road, one of those.
Are those retirement villages considered?
Oh, right where the gas stations are there?
Yeah.
That area.
That area.
There's a lot of there.
Yeah, it's village commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's Wrightstown is in the 5 Points area. I don't know exactly which lots it is, but it's not in the quarries. It's in the 5 Points area.
Hmm.
Yeah, where the gas stations anyway.
Yeah, village commercial.
Yeah.
Well, it might be a good idea, Phil, if the Board of Supervisors were to vote to give the Planning Commission the authority to look into the pros and cons of Newtown getting out of the jointure. I think that's the way to handle it, so you guys could really have this discussion to be put on the record and to advise us about the pros and cons. Don't you think that would be the procedure?
I don't disagree. I think that once we were ever to say that, the jointure would go in an upheaval.
Yeah.
And maybe we get more respect as we count them.
I mean, it can't hurt, you're just advising us, we're
Yeah.
not making a decision.
I think the jointure is very outdated and it's time for something to change.
I've been saying that since me and Jerry been on the board. This ain't Gordon, I think the three of us were.
Well, the jointure was formed in 1980, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Was there zoning in place in Newtown Township prior to the jointure? There was.
It's a lot more complicated now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it used to be a very short little pamphlet. It's a lot bigger now.
Well, the jointure probably was formed prior to Newtown Grant.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, all these developments didn't happen yet. And, you know, that's why we have, which is good, I think it's great, we're a little small contained city, so to speak, but that's what gave us the Newtown grants, the Tyler walks, the whatever, is because we were forced to, for this type of building to go on back then.
Well, I remember one of the former members years ago said that, I guess in the, beginning in the early 90s, they had so many PRDs coming in to planning commission that they would be in here until 2 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
reviewing plans.
yeah.
It was so
created
overwhelming.
PRDs to simplify the process.
And that's why it was approved, because the township was so overwhelmed with all the development coming in, they just couldn't,
They couldn't process it all.
they couldn't, you know? And at least the PRDs we have, they're rolling.
At this point, they're going to, you don't need them anymore. More than half of the communities or the neighborhoods in Newtown are PRDs.
PRDs,
You have
yeah.
grandmother settlement agreement.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because the validity challenge, just like WA was a validity challenge.
Yeah.
that goes back to the 70s.
2,500.
Yeah. So it's 1800s, enough to say. Yeah, the other thing is, of course, doing away with the joints, it doesn't resolve a lot of the issues, because a lot of developers, particularly commercial developers, still want to be in Newtown because this is where the people are, this is where the other growth is. So it's not going to relieve of people coming in and making applications or getting validity challenges, zoning hearing board appeals and all that stuff. So we're not going to get any less work, it's just that the other communities are going to have to scramble to catch up.
I agree, and just to take the Wawa issue, or whatever you want to call it, Wawa, cookies, whatever. Michelle, as our planner, did go through the jointure to protect the jointure in regards to acreage and where a Wawa could or could not go. Now, if we stood on our own, we wouldn't have to be protecting the jointure. They'd have to find their own planner to go in there and protect them against. So in essence, they benefited from us getting a Wawa application.
Well, at this point, there hasn't been an application to Wrightstown or Upper Makefield.
Because according to the Wawa specs, again, Michelle made sure there was no property acreage that a Wawa could go on. She kept it under 5 acres. Or I remember sitting in on those meetings, and she kept it. I think the only possible is where M&M Sunoco is in Upper Makefield, which that would be on a busy corner. I mean, there's all kind of.
Yeah, that's doable for a small. Actually, when Michelle got started, it was suggested to her, I don't know, it was the supervisors or what, that in doing this plan, that they include parcels in Upper Makefield and Wrightstown and Newtown, just so it didn't automatically come to Newtown. So they would have a choice. And we had discussions with some of the developers. Aren't you interested in Upper Makefield? What about over here? What about over there? And of course, there's more money here, so they.
Well, not only that, but there was the matter of intersecting roadways. It had to be a major roadway into an arterial road, but, you know, there's not that many real.
There's only 1 or 2 parcels at each place other than here. Even in Newtown, there's only 1 or 2 parcels. This is the parcels
At
here.
all.
Yeah.
So why would you want a gas station anywhere else?
Could have been right
Except where the road
I don't speak for a lot of what, I don't know what their
It only makes
criteria
sense.
are, you know.
You know, you gotta remember too that over 50% of Upper Makefield is protected open space.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah,
no
because
matter,
they were willing to be taxed for it and pay for the open
Yeah.
space tax. And that's why, they buy open space like crazy.
Yeah, their property taxes are much higher than ours.
My opinion is that the jointure should have protected us from this, what do you call it, that Wawa suing us?
Validity challenge?
Validity challenge. When you go to the jointure, they're saying we're stupid because we didn't anticipate this. They neglected to advise us that it was necessary to have a use for this. That's what the jointure should have been able to do to protect us, and we wouldn't have had this challenge in front of us today. So we didn't benefit from the jointure at all with regard to that. And they're trying to say, we're to blame because we were slow to act. They were slow to act as a whole jointure.
It was slow to act.
System
Yeah,
slow to begin.
I can't say the Jointure, we knew.
What'd you say, Dennis?
Our zoning is the same as theirs, so we were all in
It's all,
the
we're all in the same boat that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
we had, the reality was that we had time, we started developing our E30 use, whatever it was called
Yeah,
earlier.
all of that.
Plenty of time. Michelle drafted an ordinance, and it went to the Jointure, and then she was actually advised to wait on it, not to quit to it. Sat unmoved for 6 or 9 months. Because somebody actually in Newtown told her not to do it, just to wait, don't spend the money, because her hours are valuable too. And so, in the interim, they developed their plan, they submitted their application, and we didn't have our ordinance passed. That's what really happened. And the problem with the jointure is, you can never get any consensus there without fighting about it. You know, the solicitors change every 2 years, and they get different advice. We got there last year, and we were surprised at how backward and how old the ordinances were. That's why we're sort of changed them and updated a lot of the ordinances. And that's the way the other communities liked it. They didn't want things updated. They didn't want to modernize. Because the more archaic it was, the more it suited them. It doesn't work for us.
But in regards to the R30,
Yeah.
it was different than the old days because this was a timing issue.
Yes.
We had to get it in,
Yes.
and going through the jointure can take months.
It took extra time.
And that's why Mr. Van Leuven slid in, and
But it wasn't because of the jointure, it was because right here in Newtown, that things are kind of delayed. Because the jointure would have approved it.
well, because it didn't affect
They didn't care, they really
Yeah,
didn't care.
it just affected Newtown, they don't care.
Yeah. Well, they had a couple of dogs in the fight because, again, those small parcels that, even though they were there, no one was going to choose that over Newtown.
Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up for discussion, there you go.
Is this a topic that we want to spend, we want to dedicate a portion of the meeting to and have people come, invite colleagues or board members to come in and talk about this? Maybe just the fact that we are willing to discuss this and they're aware that we're willing to discuss this might prompt some more cooperation on their part. But I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if we want to set aside a meeting to talk about the pros and cons of remaining in the jointure, and everybody has an opportunity to think this through, develop a list of pros and cons, because Mr. Calabro, I think, makes some very good points. I'm kind of a rookie here. I've only lived in this town for 6 years. 8 years now. I'm getting old. Time flies. At my age, time flies whether you're having fun or not. So is this something that we want to put on an agenda and discuss?
I mean, I don't know legally, we're an advisory.
Supervisors have to direct us to do it. And it would have a lot more authority if the supervisor told us to do it, if we just took it up on our own. So you feel that's what we do, but as supervisor, we want these, if they direct us to do it, there's a reason for it.
I want to ask a question. Are we off the record with this? Are we off the record with this, or is this on the record? This part of the conversation?
It was a hypothetical question.
I think I wouldn't put in chapter and verse, but you could say that we've got
Brief
discussions about
discussion
the
of the
jointure.
liability of the jointure, how's that?
Correct, that's what you need to say.
Okay.
I mean, us as only being an advisory board, we know it's ultimately the decision of our supervisors, whatever move they would want to make, but is it in our purview to discuss it and review it?
If the supervisors say they want us to take a look at this and make some recommendations to them, then it's in our purview. As simple as that.
It's no different if we asked you to look at the business comments.
Correct.
Give us an opinion on it.
We serve at the pleasure of the supervisors. I mean, if
Then we're all
doing anything
here.
illegal.
Well, so
this is-
sorry.
I just would mention it's not unanimous on the four that
What's that?
The idea is not unanimous out of the four that are here.
That's it. Okay.
That's
The
the
only
way
we only need three.
But also before you guys would make any ultimate decisions about something like that, you'd want to hear a lot more about stuff that you haven't thought about. So if we were given that task, we would need to bring in some experts on zoning and legal positions, planning positions, that kind of stuff. Ask the Bucks-County Planning Commission to come in and offer their advice. Ask the Delaware Valley Regional people to come in and give us their opinions about stuff. We can really sort of gather information, because we're not the experts here about.
I'm sure you would have a lot of members of the public attending that meeting.
That'd be great.
Well, I didn't think anybody cared
I
anymore.
don't even know what jointure is.
But also,
I've got
you
a lot
remember
of
Peggy Driscoll, who used to be our
conversation.
planner? She wrote her master's thesis on this,
On the jointure.
on the jointure when it was new.
Who's that?
So she might have a lot.
Judy Goldstein, she's one of our former planners.
She was our planner for many years here,
Well,
yeah.
she might be the one and only expert on the
Well,
jointure.
I'm sure she's still in the county, she's still
Yeah.
around.
Still in the
So-
county, but she did write her master's thesis
So
on
we
it.
approach her.
And she wasn't
Approach her
working
indeed.
for any of the jointure partners at that time.
Jane James,
I think she left there, and I think she went to Gilmore.
well, whatever, we'll find her. We'll find her.
Although Chester was probably on the chairman of Wrightstown at that time too.
Chester's
He's
been,
my entire life.
Yeah.
Chester's been supervisor on Wrightstown, I believe, for 34 years.
Is it 35?
He's
35
35.
years?
31, 35.
And so is Jane, she's been there probably just as long. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So you guys need to have a conversation, get it on your agenda.
And I guess that's something you'd have to, the supervisors with your solicitor